Hi everyone, it's Tammy. Thank you very much for joining me today. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I'm really glad to have you here. Stay tuned and just kind of check things out. Subscribe, share, let me know what you like. Let me know what you'd like to hear me speak on, because that's what this is all about. If you've been here before, you're a current subscriber, thank you very much for being a part of this journey with me. It does evolve, as with everything in life. Nothing is static. And basically, I'm wanting to talk about inflammation, but I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of background as to how I even came into this. So, well, actually, let me start off by saying, if you're new to me, I practice pharmacology. I have a background in pharmacology and the ongoing study of plant constituents and their effect on the human genome and with regards to drug development, which is significant actually for this. So I've recently been doing some started some radio shows, and we started doing some the Facebook Live. So I've been uploading those here on YouTube, and it's kind of I don't want to say awkward. I'm a real serious person. If you haven't been able to tell, it's very difficult for me to bring levity to what I am doing. Not because I don't enjoy it. It's I don't know why. It's just my nature, I guess. I like to have fun, but sometimes it's just kind of difficult weaving this in. So when it comes to the radio program, my co-host happens to be my son, who is not afraid of the stage. He's been on the stage since he was 5. So he does bring a lot of levity. His improv is phenomenal. And I think sometimes it may be a little bit, at least for me, it can be a little bit more, can be too much. That's the way I want to say it. It could potentially be too much. I don't know. That's just me. I think sometimes I get too serious for him. So it's an interesting dynamic that we have. But the message, bottom line, is to upgrade our level of understanding, downgrade our need to judge through nature's messages of adaptation. And that's really what all of this is. It's, like I said a little while ago, life, nature, nothing is static. It's an organic process. It's an organic existence. So there's nothing static. So there's always changes occurring. And that's really the message from nature. I mean, we can kind of, try to have fun with, what is this plant? It's like there's community, right? They help one another out through signaling danger and through providing shade. The taller ones provide shade for the lower ones, because the lower ones don't require as much sunlight. So it's a very interesting relationship just to observe plants. But the bottom line to all of nature is adaptation. And that's the reason for the radio shows. But like I said, when the two of us get together, sometimes I always carry out all of what I want to say, but that's fine, because it really is about being out of control. And out of control is about adapting. It's adapting to what is and just going with it. And so that's essentially what the radio shows are about, or that's the premise, and that's the experience. However, through these recent talks, we've been getting a lot into, I'm just checking the lighting here. That's why I keep kind of looking around. Getting into, obviously, mental health and addiction. If you haven't seen those yet, that's pretty much what they are. We've talked about cannabis, the unbelievable need to actually legalize plants, GMOs. I don't think we actually did Facebook Live for those. I did, although I did do a video for that on here. But all of this applies to why epigenetic health, epigenetic hygiene is essential. And I actually did a video here for that as well, because of adaptation. And we have to understand that change is our existence. That is all our existence is based on, is consistent change. And So through the recent talks on addiction and mental health, again, like we talked about, primarily was cannabis, and we got into alcohol. And this coming week, we're going to be doing, I'm going to be doing a segment on disordered eating and sugar addiction. But it all comes down to the same thing, which is change. So as I was kind of like looking up for this last radio show on alcohol, I mean, there's some interweaving dialogue about other drugs, and I know that my son has brought up, he was asking questions once about cocaine and legalizing it. And when I was saying to legalize plants, and he was suggesting that I was encouraging the legalization of cocaine, where he was asking me if that's what I was saying. And cocaine is not a plant. It's the coca plant. Cocaine is an alkaloid that comes from the coca plant. And while the coca plant does have produce a lot of the same effects as cocaine, it's not as intense. It's just like the opium poppy. It has this very sedating. This is the reason why in The Wizard of Oz they're going, poppies, you know, everybody, the poppies, put them all to sleep. It has a very sedating effect, especially when it's concentrated. And of course, we looked at a poppy field. So that was a very metaphorical statement for the use of opium, because opium was very, very big at one point in our cultural history. But that said, opium is an alkaloid that was discovered back in the 17th century by Merck themselves, which was at the time, it's a family, and they had one of the first apothecaries in Germany, and so they were able to isolate the alkaloid and produce opium, and that's where we get our morphine, our codeine, and unfortunately even our heroin as a result. But that is a plant constituent. Cocaine is a plant constituent that was discovered in the mid to late 1800s, 19th century. And actually, I recently saw something written somewhere that was saying that Merck had isolated the cocaine alkaloid, and that's not even close to the truth. He was a graduate student of a university in Germany, and you have to forgive me, his name escapes me at this moment. Niemann was his last name. I think it's Albert Niemann. He was a graduate student when he discovered cocaine alkaloid and was able to isolate it. The timeline is fascinating. Merck did get their hands on it. They were the first company to get a hold of it and produce it. And I think the first year they produced like 4 pounds. And within a 10-year period, they were producing hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it grew rather rapidly. But the point to all of this is that it is a plant constituent. And when you actually get it in the plant form, although it does have the vasoconstriction effects, it does have the anesthetic effects, and it does have the clarity, mental clarity, energy, boosted energy. It's not as intense as if you're going to snort cocaine. Nonetheless, you're still getting the plant constituent if you were to eat the leaf, put the leaf in your mouth, however you wanted to do it, you would still get cocaine in your system. And so cocaine, as I talked about on the radio show, it's pretty much in the same classification as a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. So we have antidepressants on the market that have the same activity in the brain. But the important thing here, because essentially this program or this video is about inflammation. So what I wanted to say there is that it used to be historically that people would talk about, if you use cocaine, you're going to develop Parkinson's. That was the big one I always used to hear when I was a kid. That was the reason for not doing it, because you didn't want to get Parkinson's. So it was going to lead to some kind of health issue. Sadly, my father passed away with Parkinson's, and he never used coke. So it's not linked to that. You might actually trigger that because it is involved with dopamine, and dopamine is involved with movement. And so, I mean, there are some correlations, but I don't necessarily think cocaine is a direct effect on Parkinson's, although it does lead to a lot of neuroinflammation, and here's why. So when they look at the way cocaine affects the body, the metabolism and such, it's been identified that cocaine actually increases the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. And this was very significant, a very, very significant thing for me to find. The reason for that is because I had just done a little write-up on my Facebook page, Synergescence, talking about peppermint and why peppermint isn't actually good for everybody, and it's especially not good for children 3 and under. And smokers, and it's frightening to think of the number of menthol cigarettes that we have. And I don't know that I see a lot of people smoking menthol cigarettes, but the fact is that the menthol and the peppermint increases the permeability of the lung tissue, which means that you can breathe in more things. So it's recommended that if you're a cigarette smoker, you don't use peppermint or anything with menthol in it, really. Your vapor rubs and stuff like that. But the fact is, it doesn't make any difference if you're a smoker or not. I mean, in all reality, given this time in our lives on the planet, and this is 2018, not 20,000. Oh my gosh, I just advanced 18,000 years. 2018, it's 2018. It's not advisable. Hopefully in 2018, maybe we can get back to using peppermint. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. But in 2018, peppermint and other mentholated items are really not advisable because of the way it increases the lung tissue permeability. And see, this is what I'm getting at. It's this tissue permeability that I'm actually pointing to. So cocaine was the reason why I started just kind of looking into different things. And like I said, I even started it off with talking about peppermint. I hadn't even talked about cocaine at that point. But the fact is that there are chemicals out there that are of natural occurrence, because cocaine is truthfully an alkaloid. I realize it's considered a street drug and it's an illicit drug and it's an addictive drug. I get all that, but it's part of a plant. It's a plant constituent that is known to increase the permeability of the blood-brain barrier, which means that chemicals can pass through. Lipophilic chemicals can pass into the brain tissue. And we're talking about the brain tissue, and then we're also talking about the lung tissue. And let's just say, I mean, those are just 2 plant chemicals, all right? I haven't done all of my researches to try to identify a full list. I will continue to do so. And should you be watching this in the near future, hopefully there will be a list in the description box below. If not, you're always welcome to hit me up, Tammy@synergescence.com, to see if I was able to ever put together a list of chemicals. But the fact is that we have 45 million chemicals that are man-made, being currently used around the world, that are known to be, for the most part, what they call endocrine disruptors. Endocrine disruptors are lipophilic chemicals. And for the most part, they're also considered xenoestrogens. I'm not saying cocaine is a xenoestrogen. What I am saying, though, is it does increase the permeability of the blood-brain barrier, and that is frightening. And then when you have things like peppermint, which is so broadly used because it seems to be so benign, but in fact, it does lead, it's not advisable for a particular genetic issue. Oh gosh, I don't have it in front of me. Well, I guess I could look it up. I was going to look up my post on synergescence, but I'll just wait on that. It does increase the chances of cholestasis, which is a problem with the bile and the gallbladder. There is a genetic deficiency that inhibits the body's ability to use glucose. That is another reason why it's not recommended. Like I said, it increases children under the age of 3, it increases their chances of jaundice. which speaks to the gallbladder issue. And like I said, as far as smokers goes, it actually, the most poignant piece was the fact that it actually increases the permeability of the lung tissue. So if we're talking about chemicals being able to get into the brain, now we're talking about opening up our lung tissue and being able to breathe in more chemicals. Not to mention the fact menthol actually slows down the elimination of nicotine. So it increases the nicotine levels in the body, which obviously affects the brain at that point too. But this video is not just serving as a warning. It is a warning in the sense of that's just 2 plant constituents, and there's more. Obviously there's more, because the most frightening piece of the information right now is the fact that they are learning how to control the blood-brain barrier. That's how I want to say that. Now, before I go any further, I'm not trying to be an alarmist, okay? I'm not saying the sky is falling and we're all doomed. That's not what this is. What I am saying is pay attention and understand that nature communicates via chemicals. That's our own body, that's how our body communicates, is with chemicals. Change is part of our existence. It's actually our entire existence is consistent change. And if we have these plants that we use and we are studying and we're turning into products, because like I just said, there's 45 million chemicals that are currently being used around the world and consumed by humans. These chemicals are coming from the study of plants and how, I mean, if they're looking at how cocaine can actually do this, because what ends up happening when the permeability of the blood-brain barrier increases, it signals what's called platelet-derived growth factor. Okay, and when that happens, it's that's an inflammatory reaction. Okay, because all that, I mean, we can get into the specifics of the chemistry, but really, if we're going to just kind of bottom line it all right now, it just sends a signal to the body that the body's being invaded. That's all it's doing. The body's being invaded. So, of course, the body is going to produce cells, endothelial cells in this case, because that's where, you know, there's blood vessels in the brain, right? So it's going to produce the endothelial cells to actually help protect. So it's going to create an inflammatory reaction. This is the stress response. If you haven't seen my other videos, this is the primary message that I am conveying at this point. The stress response is a survival tactic that the body is wired to activate when the body's being threatened. I don't know if you heard me mention a little while ago that plants communicate. One of the things that they do is they assist one another. They release signaling molecules to activate other plants to begin to protect themselves in the event of a threat or at the potential threat that's coming into the area. This is extraordinary. And so ultimately what that means is, like, I'll give you an example. In this area of New Mexico, we have a lot of chametha. Chametha is very high in salicylic acid. Salicylic acid, also known as aspirin, to those of us who take OTC, over-the-counter meds, salicylic acid is a signaling molecule that plants use to signal potential threats in the area to other plants. So what that does is it creates an inflammatory reaction, a stress response, or survival tactic in another plant or another bunch of plants, different types of plants, to begin to produce the chemistry necessary to protect themselves. Cocaine as an alkaloid is a toxin it's produced in the cocoa plant, and it actually protects that plant from herbivores. This is significant. Okay, so inflammatory chemicals, which is something the body actually produces on an as-needed basis, are important. They are toxic, just like cocaine is toxic to other, to other animals. The chemicals that our body produces are also toxic. This is what's known as oxidative stress. And so if we are increasing the permeability of our lung tissue through all these mentholated products, and we are increasing the blood-brain barrier permeability, not saying people are using cocaine, but they understand how this mechanism works. And so they're actually implementing various tactics in order to increase the permeability to be able to insert medications. And then they're looking to turn it off. So frighteningly enough, like I said, they're figuring out how to regulate the activity of the blood-brain barrier. Now, the blood-brain barrier also varies depending on the brain temperature. This is something that they also understand. So our brain is susceptible, and and there's so many variables, it's very difficult to grasp what's doing what. This is why I say we can get into the chemistry, but there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can increase the permeability of the blood-brain barrier, and that is obviously with various chemicals, not just cocaine. Lipophilic chemicals, and if we have 45 million chemicals on the planet known as endocrine disruptors, because they're lipophilic, any one of them could be doing the very same thing. We don't know this. And so all this is doing, no matter what kind of chemical we're talking about, is it activates the blood-derived, platelet-derived growth factor, which activates endothelial cells, which is where the inflammation comes in. So it basically activates the inflammatory process. And to me, this is significant because, it's exciting because it's amazing to see what the body can do. But these toxins are significant because, or I should say, this inflammatory reaction is toxic to the body when it consistently goes on. This is the reason why we're seeing things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, all these neuroinflammatory health conditions. The other factor is, out of Cornell, they've been able to identify a direct correlation between more of an inflamed gut, so to speak, dysbiosis. I've talked about this. I think I've talked about that with you guys before. Dysbiosis is an imbalance of gut bacteria, which means you've got higher levels of inflammatory bacteria, the bad bacteria, and not enough good bacteria. This is an indicator, number one, that the hydrochloric acid in your stomach isn't at the optimum level, because that is actually required for regulating flora balance. So that said, gut flora is directly linked to neuroinflammation. So now we're back to the gut-brain activity. So, and what happens in the gut, and dysbiosis is a reaction or a result of the stress response. So you have an inflammatory reaction. It upsets it upsets the boat, man. It rocks the boat. It rocks our world, and inflammation continually is a part of this. So, how do we protect ourselves from all of these chemicals that could be potentially getting into our body through the brain and through the lungs? For heaven's sake, you guys, I'm sorry. When I get to talk about disordered eating next week, if you're watching this before next Monday, the 15th, be warned. I'm going to talk about these ridiculous wraps that people are putting on their bodies to lose fat. That's a short-term reaction. That's a short-term effect. But the long-term results of crap like that is horrifying. Because what am I talking about? Because besides the permeability of our brain and the permeability of our lungs, we already know that the skin has it. This is our biggest barrier right here. Now, first of all, in clothes, nanotechnology is huge. It's become very, very big. It's in our supplements. It's in our body care. It's in clothes. It's been outlawed in Europe, from the last thing I read. Europe no longer allows things like that because they were putting these chemicals in the clothing to protect the clothes from getting stinky, and yet at the same time, they're chemicals. This nanotechnology, also known as delivery systems, which I know I've talked about that before. These delivery systems enhance the uptake of these products, and I'm going to in future videos, I'm going to talk about this because it's going to also be on the radio show with regards to nutraceuticals, even body care products. But you really can't rely on what's on the label. I'm just going to say that. And they are supposed to let you know whether or not there's the delivery technology. But all they're doing is increasing the uptake of everything that's in that supplement or in the skincare product. And so when we're talking about increasing the permeability of the brain and the lungs, we also have to take into consideration the rapid uptake that they are trying to create with the nanotechnology. And those wraps are deadly as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to say it here. I don't think I've ever said this before in my video, but I'm going to say it here. I am really tired of these companies with these products that, no, I know I've said this, and I'm going off on a tangent right now, but obesity and weight loss is such a big market, and we have an increase in autism, and everybody wants to blame vaccinations, but I'm going for some of these companies with all of this nanotechnology because you're trying to help stay-at-home moms create an income, and thank you for that, and at the same time you're actually bringing harm to their families with all these chemicals. So again, brain permeability, lung permeability, skin permeability. What are we going to do? It sounds like I am being alarmist. It sounds like, oh my God, we're never going to get, we can't win this battle, so why bother listening any further, right? Well, you have that option. But the fact is, at some point, you're going to be gone, and your children will hopefully still be here. And my wish is that we can actually teach our children a different way. And I'm moving out of the sunlight. That's really my wish, is that once we're gone, our children have a fighting chance. So how do we? I'll try that. How do we overcome something like this, right? The best answer I have for that is to help. I don't even want to say I don't agree. I'm trying to think here. It's the best. I'm thinking of the best way to say it, because our typical tactic at this point is we duplicate the mechanism of action. So if somebody's coming in here and they're trying to regulate our brain barrier, right? We don't know what's going on. What we can say, what we can rest assured of, is that our body is stressed. It is in inflammatory mode because of the environment, because of the world that we live in 2018. And so essentially, the immune system is activated. It's just activated. And so, and you may be wondering, well, how is that even possible? Because I get colds all the time, or I'm prone to getting the flu. There's different levels. There's the innate and there's the adaptive. The innate is what's going to protect you from cold and flus, and it's possible that is overly stressed, and therefore you're more susceptible to colds and flu. But the adaptive immune system is what's producing the antibodies. And this is where we kind of get a dysregulation in the immune system. So when I say the immune system is activated, more than likely you've got high levels of antibodies floating around, potentially high levels of macrophages, but the whole thing is disrupted. One of the things about cocaine is that it actually dysregulates the production of nitric oxide. Okay, that's significant. And that would be another reason why we're seeing, because when this happens, this is when the immune system becomes activated as well. So you have all of this, like I said, this inflammatory reaction going on, and it's next to impossible. And by the way, whatever you don't think these are orbs, this is dust. It's breezy outside, my windows are open, and this is dust because I live in the middle of the desert. Anyway, because I'm just noticing all these lights floating around. So instead of trying to figure out what is going on, just look at it this way. Your digestive system is disrupted, your body is stressed, and chances of any sort of inflammation, including neuroinflammation, are pretty much guaranteed. So the best bet is to stabilize. And your best bet for stabilizing is through natural signaling molecules, natural lipophilic chemicals. And those would be essential oils. But it's like I told somebody the other day in an email, it's time that we start using these consciously. And I don't mean that to be rude. I mean that because we're not the same species that we were 50 years ago, let alone 300 years ago or even 1,000 years ago. We're very different. And so what worked then is not going to work in the body, especially given the amount of chemicals that we're exposed to. 65% of the population is on medication. If you are diagnosed with a chronic illness, you are already on medication. You cannot be just randomly using essential oils just because there's a book and there's a population of people that says they're good for you. There's a lot of conflict with medications, especially at the liver enzyme level. In fact, let me just show you. I made this today. You can't even see it. There you go. You can't smell it. It smells really yummy. However, I made that today. That's going to be going out. Somebody that has both cardiovascular and respiratory issues, and it's going to help with that. Fortunately, that particular salve, I am creating universal blends or formulas that could be used for your basic health issues. You can find those on Facebook, the Synergessence Facebook, under my shop. But they're essentially for sleep, digestion, pain, muscle tenderness, and respiration. Just did that one for today. But like I said, this particular one cannot be used by everybody. In fact, it can't really be used by many people because of what I was just talking about. The conflict at the liver enzyme level for anybody who's taking medication. That if you're, and whether it is respiratory issues or whether it is cardiovascular issues, or for that matter, even anxiety issues, you couldn't use it because it would interact with your medication. So, but as I was getting into, I advocate strongly. In fact, I feel like I'm the voice for essential oils. I've been practicing with them for 30 years now. I do not represent a company. I would never represent a company simply because there's so much changing. And I'm dedicated to individualizing this. This is why I say consciously. It has to be a conscious attempt to individualize the use of the oils. Now, because I've been working with oils for 30 years, that's not the reason why I'm advocating for oils. I'm advocating for oils because everything that we currently do as a culture I didn't see my timer, and I'm thinking to myself, I just sat here and talked to myself this whole time without turning. Oh my gosh, it's just the sunlight. Anyway, I advocate for oils because they do more than symptom relief. While I am interested in symptom relief, I am more interested in long-term effects. So symptom relief is short-term. I am equally, if not more, interested in long-term. The conventional model, which is what we typically practice, whether we're practicing natural remedies and or allopathic medicine, it's all about symptom relief, and we're focused on how we can feel better right now. And oftentimes we get trapped into, like I said, duplicating the mechanism of action, which is harmful. And so the idea here is to use oils in a way that actually provides stability. Most importantly, I mean, I know I keep saying that over and over again. And if somebody is doing something, like in the case of this particular salve, this individual isn't taking medication. They're strictly working with oils and nutrition. That's all they're doing. And they're seeing a world of results occur for them. So this is doing both short-term and long-term, effects. I'm creating that. But at the same time, I don't know where everybody else is unless I speak to you personally. So I have to advocate for stability. But that is the reason why I'm speaking for the oils, because the oils, yes, they do contain the constituents that are being studied, but there's a synergy to the combination within an individual oil, and then you mix that with the other ones, mindfully understanding what you're trying to target. And now you've got a powerful blend that can make a world of difference for somebody. And again, if there's medications involved, your primary focus has got to be on stability, and it's stabilizing the hormonal and the immune systems is where I would go. Yes, I started off talking about the brain and the blood-brain barrier, but keep in mind, nitric oxide synthase is a genetic factor that is very influential on neurochemistry, okay? It also is very influential on the immune system, and it is involved in the stress response. Therefore, helping to regulate that function so that we can downgrade the inflammation that's going on. Are we going to decrease the permeability of the blood-brain barrier? I have no idea. Maybe not. You may have to be stabilizing your body for the rest of your life. Other times I'm going to talk about, the irreversible effects of all of these, the different things that we're doing. This is where we're getting into long-term effects. And I realize that this doesn't appeal to many people. And that's okay. But like I said, if we can't do it for ourselves, can we please at least attempt to try to understand this for our children's sake? Because they don't need to be repeating our health issues. And with everybody out there trying to control one thing or another, and like I said, when I read this through Cornell, that they are identifying ways to activate or increase permeability and decrease permeability, that got scary. That's where it starts to get scary. So I say it's time to buckle up and, and hang on for 10, because we got to stabilize the hormonal system and we've got to stabilize the immune system. So I will put a couple of links in the description box as far as some adaptogens you can use for stabilizing the hormonal system. If I can come up with oil suggestions, I will. I'm not comfortable with that. Again, I can try to make some universal suggestions since I have come up with universal formulas. Maybe that'll make a difference for you. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at TammyDavis8. Like I said, Synergescence, I'll have that link in the box below. You're welcome to shop for my products there. They are universally safe. And I think that's it. And if you have any other questions or there's something else you'd like for me to talk about, let me know. Tammy at synergescence.com. I appreciate you watching. Please, again, share, subscribe, comment. This is our journey together, and I feel like our mission really is to help our kids have a healthier, functioning future. All right. Check you later.